listeners, to another episode of Saturday Night Cinema. As always, I am your host, Sawyer St. Sin. And again, I got a new shirt. See it? See? New shirt. Sorry. And we are back for another movie in our Grindhouse month of May. Like I said before, this movie is kind of like at the tail end of the Grindhouse. Couple of things that I didn't know before going into this is when you look it up, everything says like 1983. But doing a little bit of digging, it actually was a theater release in 1981. You know, it had a pretty like low budget, but most Grindhouse films do, right? But they spent like millions on promotion. So they really wanted this to be like a big theatrical like release and do really well in the box office. But unfortunately, like after opening week, it just kind of and fizzled out. Didn't even like make what it took to produce it, let alone what they spent to advertise it, you know? So that was kind of a bummer. But I guess someone, you know, they released it onto video in 83 and just kind of like was like, oh, we're just gonna hide this like away. Like this 81, we're just gonna act like that didn't happen. Also, there were 3 people in this movie that when I saw them, I was like, man, they look super familiar. What do I know these people from? So we have Mr. Jeffrey Combs in his first like horror movie role, his horror movie debut. If you guys don't know who Jeffrey Combs is, I'm disappointed in you. Reanimator, guys, he is the Reanimator. Then we had 2 other people. One guy, I forgot his name right now, but he is like a writer and director as well. He's like a 3rd generation director, but he co-wrote and directed Ghoulies. Also, if you don't know what Ghoulies is, I'm disappointed in you. And then another actor, Scott, his last name escapes me right now, but he was like, just some things that you might know. I don't know, The Ghoulies, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Police Academy, just to name like a few. So we have a cast of some people who have like some staples now in horror history, right? Also, some of the actors, like some of the older actors in the movie, like were in Hogan's Heroes and like actually like won awards for Hogan's Heroes, which if you don't know about that, it's, you know, an old like wartime situation. I always was like, I don't want to watch that when like, you know, my grandparents would want to watch it. But anywho, so Frightmare, right? So we start off with like, I don't know, he was giving me more like Christopher Lee vibes than what I think they intended him to be more of a Vincent Price like kind of guy. But you know what we're talking about. Vincent Price, Christopher Lee, they're wanting him to be like this. And he's like pretty much like the last like horror movie film from like the black and white era. Like he's, you know, he's the last living legend, so to say. Conrad, such a like, you know, like highfalutin, comes from wealth kind of name, right? Conrad. anyways, so the greats fall sometimes, and we see that he's, you know, doing commercials now as his like Dracula character. So that kind of sucks. And the director is giving him some shit, and the director goes out to have a smoke and look over some stuff. And for some reason, he's like split-legged the side of the balcony. And all Conrad does is just with his cane and pushes him right off and kills him. And he said, take 19 when that happened. And then him and his butler just kind of leave. Then he goes to some kind of like film society screening of like his movie, one of his movies. And then at the end, he comes out to talk to, you know, the audience. And during this, he has a heart attack. And one of the film society students or whatever, they seem like they're college students, revives him. And he asks like what her name is, and she says Meg. And then we cut to like him at home in his bedroom, like talking to his butler and his wife, telling them that he knows that it is, you know, his time and like it's close. And he had one of his director friends like direct a bunch of these like videos for him. While he's sitting there, it seems like Conrad had died. And then the director starts like saying some like, you know, negative shit, right? Because they weren't really like friends, you know how that is, right? You have those people that are like really nice and loving to your face, and then like as soon as you're out of the room, they're like, oh my God, let me tell you about this bitch, right? Anyways, so Conrad pops up and kills him, and then he says, take 20. So at this point, I'm assuming that he's killed at least 20 people. I'm assuming he said 19 after the director and 20 after this guy. So just assuming that he's already a murderer. But then he does something that kind of, I don't know, was kind of weird. I mean, I understand that like he's supposed to be this person who played Dracula and like that's his whole like shtick. But he's in his like full suit and cape, and he crawls into a casket that is in his room and closes it with his cane. And then the next thing that we see is like him getting wheeled into the church for his funeral. Open casket, wife, you know, and her friend, the medium, sitting beside her. And I say that with disdain because we'll talk about her later. And then she goes and she like opens this big flowing, you know, curtain, and it's a video of Conrad, and he's like, you didn't think I was going to let anybody else be the star of my funeral, like, you know, and he's giving all of this, like, you know, he's giving his own eulogy. Really narcissistic move there. But it's really interesting because in that he made it a point to say that he was not cremated because he plans on coming back to life. Okay, okay. I see you, Conrad. He's gonna make his big comeback, right? Okay. Yeah. So that film society that I talked about earlier with Jeffrey Combs and those other like guys that unfortunately I can't remember their names right now. They break into his mausoleum. First off, guys, Mr. Conrad has a mausoleum all to himself. There are statues and flowers and for some reason a projection screen. I don't know. And then like in the middle of the mausoleum is like his casket. Just a whole building just for him. And then on the outside is like some neon stars that flash with his name. Guys, dude. This guy really loves himself. I can say that. He really thinks very highly of himself. But so, like, you know, there's a video that starts playing. I guess they tripped some kind of like automatic, you know, trap thing. I don't know. But the mausoleum door starts to shut, like they're going to be trapped in there with him. They're able to like take a statue and like, you know, hold it open. But they decide to take his body. Well, not just his body, but the casket all together. They take it to this house that they're staying in. When the wife gets word of his body being snatched, her and the medium do a seance, right? Try to contact Conrad, see where he is. But they bring him back to life, you know. And she's like, Conrad, where have you been? And, you know, he describes hell. And then his wife, like, yells, like, for him to send the people that took his body to hell. Okay? And then we see something that I haven't really seen in a horror film. I don't know if I've seen it in any other kind of film or not. But, like, so you know how the casket, like, has, like, the two doors, like, the bottom half and the top half? Well, the top half of it just, like, the door just, like, explodes off, right? Just, it was kind of nuts. It was kind of fun. Kind of nuts. So, I mean, one by one, he starts, you know, picking off the film society. One gets his tongue partially ripped out, not fully ripped out, because you see him in the elevator later with, like, it hanging, like, out of his face. One gets burned to death. He, like, telepathically, like, sets her on fire. One is smashed repeatedly in the skull with his coffin. Like, the coffin, like, starts floating and, like, floats down the stairs after her and then just repeatedly, like, hits her, smashes her in the face. That was really cool. You know, a floating, like, casket was nice. Jeffrey Combs gets beheaded with a sword. And then a crow eats his brains. That was fun. One of them gets telepathically transported back into the mausoleum, and is choked by some kind of gas. The main guy, like, puts his body, like, back into the mausoleum, but he still dies of, I think, the same kind of, like, fume inhalation. Meg lives. We thought that she was dead, but she lives, and I'm pretty sure that's because, you know, she had resuscitated him after his first heart attack. So he was probably like, you know what, you're good. Also, when they were in the house, she called the wife and was like, hey, I know where he is. I want to help you. You know, she wasn't a bad egg. She didn't want that to go down, and so she gets spared. We always have that one, you know, that gets spared. But so once he's back in the mausoleum, the medium and his wife go back to see him, pay their respects again, make sure that everything's, you know, good. The wife is like, okay, like, I'm ready to go. And the medium's like, hey, you know, you go on ahead. I want to stay here for a minute. And that's when we find out, you guys, Conrad and the medium were lovers. They had a thing going on. So she starts, because, you know, the side piece never gets anything in the will. That's why they're a side piece. They're not supposed to be known about. So, she starts taking anything she can off the corpse. Jewelry, mine. For some reason, this big wad of 100s that's in here, mine. Just whatever she can take, right? Well, I mean, what is a horror movie without one last, like, good, like, jump scare, right? So Conrad, boom, pops up. He shoves the wad of money, like, in her throat. Just down her throat, and is, like, choking her, right? And she, like, falls over dead in the mausoleum. As, like, a video is, like, talking about how, like, my love will be for, like, you know, together forever. Well, you know, it's saying all kinds of stuff. And then the last thing that we see is the wife like shutting the door to the mausoleum and walking off. And I feel like the film society, like taking his body, was just kind of a side note of the revenge of the wife, like to get it, like knowing that there was something going on with them and like getting that revenge on, you know, the median. That's just how I felt at the end of it. I was like, oh, okay. So these kids just happened to be like an accidental like pawn in her scheme. But so, I mean, it was an interesting movie. It was really good. There was a lot of interesting camera angles that happened, and I love like an interesting new way of like looking at things. And if you've seen any of like my photos, my cameraman loves interesting angles as well. So all in all, I thought it was great. Next week we round out, you know, Grindhouse month with blood-sucking freaks, right? Blood-sucking freaks. Guys, it's been a long week, just saying. So come back, and like then you'll know also what we have in store for you for the theme for, you know, next month of June. Starting the summer months, having some summer fun, right? Right. Well, I hope you guys have a great evening. Again, come back and see me next week. Bye.